Good morning, everyone. I'm Shivam Sareen. I'm part of NASSCOM 10,000 Startups team. I manage open innovation programs here. And would like to welcome everyone to the session today. The session is on privacy tech, emerging regulations and business opportunities. And as everyone knows here, I think privacy tech or the issues related to data breaches are very common today. And we have government, we have enterprises working on it. And as startups or as founders, it's important for you also to understand, how you have to deal with this area in particular, and plus also understand what are the emerging opportunities that are there for the founders to work on. So we have Shailendra Mithunjappa, President of Verisk Financial Fintellex, to learn how privacy tech is utilizing the broad trends of digitization. So without further ado, I'll ask Shailendra to take it up. And I'll also request all of the attendees to keep your questions coming if you have any queries during the session. Shailendra would be addressing your queries every 15-20 minutes. So over to you, Shailendra, if you could just share the details of the topic or the agenda of the topic and take it forward.
Thanks, Shivam. Welcome, everyone. Firstly, thanks to NASSCOM, DSCI, and 10,000 Startups initiatives for hosting this session and inviting me. A quick introduction. Shivam has already introduced me to all of you. So I head Verisk Financial Fintellex, a provider of data management, fintech, regtech type of solutions for banking and financial services industry globally. We are part of Verisk Analytics, which is a NASDAQ-listed S&P 500 and Fortune 1000 company. I'm also involved in the startup ecosystem. I'm an advisor, an angel investor, and I'm also an independent director. You can read more about me on the LinkedIn profile, and please feel free to connect with me. Today we are going to be talking about three things mainly. One is just looking at the rise of the digital economy, what it means to be digital, how much of a significant role digital businesses are playing currently, and what are the trends in digital. Then we'll look at the evolving regulations around digital, which will also cover data protection. And then we'll kind of narrow down more specifically and see what data protection regulations are all about. And lastly, we'll touch upon privacy tech opportunities. If you are entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and want to do something in this space, either for enterprises or for consumers, I'll just quickly touch upon the kind of opportunities that are there. So, starting with the digital economy and what it means to be digital. Digital means it's a kind of very loosely defined. So I would probably want to first of all share my thoughts on how I would define a digital business. A digital business is one that creates new value for customers, using data, technology, new business models, or techniques. A digital business, could be a traditional business which transforms to become more digital, or it could be completely new businesses which are opening new spaces or opening up new sectors. And there are digital businesses which which are tech enabled, and there are digital businesses which are tech enabling. Right? I would bucket all of them under digital businesses. So what does it mean by creating new value for customers? When we say new value for customers, we are talking about increased accessibility and choice that customers get at their doorstep or on their devices. More value also means kind of instant gratification, the real-time nature of commerce, of services and products that they get. New value also means high level of personalization, ability for platforms and digital services to provide recommendations and analytics and based on user profiling and behavior and so on. Another aspect of customer value is on social engagement. The whole gamification and network effect and kind of the belongingness that it creates. And lastly, the ability to integrate products or unbundle products, right? That can bring phenomenal improvements to customer experience and add a lot more customer value. So these are all the different ways in which customer value is enhanced using digital. But what does digital transformation for an enterprise mean? Right? Is it just the way that customer interactions are managed or the sales channels are managed? Not really. Right? Digital has very wide-ranging implications for an enterprise. And when we say digital transformation, it'll mean everything from using technology and data and new techniques to innovation. How research is done, how lab work is done, what type of rapid prototyping is done. It involves using technology and data for strategy, for market strategy, for product strategy, for how you analyze competition, how you engage with stakeholders, and so on. Using technology for product, how is it designed? How do you engage with customers? How do you crowdsource feedback? So all of these are digital techniques that are used in product development. And obviously, with digital, the most impactful area is customer experience. Being able to engage with customers on an omni-channel basis, being able to map their entire customer journey and adding creating frictionless engagement with the enterprise and so on. And obviously the servicing and operational aspects, which can all be made faster, better, seamless by using technology, data, and processes. So that's what it means to be a digital business. And what does it ultimately deliver to a business or the shareholders of a business? It makes the business far more valuable. It increases the efficiency of the organization by use of technology, various kinds of advanced technologies that we are now getting to see and experience. It enables the businesses to reach out to more customers and expand the customer base through network effect and digitally reaching out to geographies that they otherwise could not. Ability to do intelligent marketing. Ability to establish the services, high availability, high scalability in terms of using cloud platforms, better decisioning and faster decisioning by using analytics. Ability to add new growth areas. Being able to do vertical integration, bundling, like I mentioned earlier, and moving to a more recurring sort of a revenue model. Kind of building subscription-driven businesses. I want to touch upon digital businesses and how big and significant they've become, how large a part they play in our lives. And for this, I'll use the example of the US market. Right? I'll just put up a set of logos, which are the largest companies in the US, globally actually, by market cap. These are the top 16 companies by market cap and ranges from 400 billion to 2.5 trillion. If you look at all of this, there is one important thing that you'll see emerging, which is that a bulk of these businesses are what I would call as digital businesses. Either they are digital enablers or digitally enabled businesses. The only ones which are exceptions are those traditional businesses, which are big, bulky, sizable. They either need to transform themselves and become more digital and kind of come into the circle, or they're going to be very quickly replaced by these other fast movers, other fast growing organizations, which are completely digitally driven. And you'll see that these will kind of come and join the top 10, top 20 global enterprises by market cap otherwise. Now, to put this in context, right, how important digital has become in our lives, just look at the most sizable digital companies. the S&P 5 or the big five of S&P, the GAFAM as we call them, their market cap is $7 trillion and their annual revenue is close to $1 trillion. The top 20 tech companies globally account for $1.5 trillion of revenue. And to put this in context, the total value of all gold ever mined by humans in their history, which is 200 metric tons, the value of that is only $10 trillion. And now we are talking about just the top 20 tech companies, which are valued at much more than that. And if you have to kind of compare against GDPs of nations, the right comparison will not be market cap. It will probably be comparing revenue to a GDP of a country. If you look at that, the top 5 companies, tech companies together, probably will be 17th or 18th largest in the world if they were to be a country. So that is the size and scale of these digital companies and the impact of data and digital technologies that we are seeing in our lives and economies. If you see one thing about all of these companies, you can put them under one of these buckets, right? Either they are components or devices, they are internet service providers or networks, digital content providers, social media, e-commerce, financial technology, or enterprise software. But if you have to kind of bucket them, all of these will fall under 3 buckets. One is digital infrastructure, right? People who create the environment and manage the ecosystem, devices, network, internet, and components to be able to go digital. The second set are all your consumer apps. Whether it is any industry, the ability to connect with consumers and deliver the product and services to consumers. And last one is on enterprise technology, right? For digital transformation of the enterprises or for them to build these digital products and service the digital in the digital economy. And just to bring an Indian flavor, we have no company which can compete with these global giants, but we are going to be getting there very soon with the rapid rise of digital in India. The biggest that I could think of today is Jio. I'm setting aside all their petrochemical and industrial businesses. Only their Jio platform business is kind of worth about 72 billion, and that's where we are as of today. To kind of summarize, how digital is growing in India and how it compares to the world, it's a very cluttered slide, so ignore most of it. I'll want you to focus on these numbers. While the population of India is growing pretty much at the same rate as the rest of the world, on every other metric in terms of mobile connections, internet connections, active social media users, e-commerce, actually we are growing faster than the global average. And that's the point that I would like to make here on this slide, right? Which means their digital adoption is rapid. That could be because that in the more developed countries, it's reached a level of saturation, and that in the more underdeveloped countries, they have still not caught on the momentum on digital. But that means we are really in a very sweet spot and a period where we are going to see very rapid growth in the digital space in India. I just want to take a quick example of how important data has become in the world of digital, and I'll take Facebook as an example. I call them the ultimate data business. If you look at Facebook in the last 10-12 years, the way they've grown, significant growth. If you see these numbers, 60% of the world's population is on the internet, and 60% of everybody that's on the internet is on Facebook. And this entire business is built on data that those consumers are creating. There is nothing else other than for that, except Facebook's physical assets are these huge, massive data centers, that look like giant manufacturing facilities, but they are all data centers. It's the largest social networking site, 2.8 billion active users every month. They generate about 4 petabytes of data every day. And here is the most important stat: 98.5% of Facebook's revenue of 86 billion comes from advertising, and the 1.5% is auxiliary things that they try to do. But now, here is a business that in its entirety is driven out of data and people's data, the significance of this will sink in as we talk more about the digital regulations and data protection particularly. Now, coming to regulations, right? What are the evolving regulations around digital? If you look at any business, what do businesses aspire to do, right? They aspire to create a moat. Right? They aspire to create a competitive advantage, have a unique proposition, have and they try to maintain this by going into green fields, establishing new spaces, creating innovation through innovation, and every business aspires to be a monopoly. Right? I mean, if anybody is saying that we don't want to be a monopoly, they're lying, right? What they really want to be is the biggest, the largest, the fastest growing, the best in the business. That's everybody's ambition, and rightfully so, right? And that's what delivers value to everybody. Businesses are trying to become asset light. They are trying to become high profit, high margin type of businesses. They want to be unregulated or deregulated. I can't say it's an aspiration, but it's more a wish. Every business wishes that they are unregulated or as lightly regulated as possible. And all global businesses will try to find tax optimizations, because that they are rightfully in doing so, if it is legal and if they are not breaching anything. What, on the other hand, right? What do consumers want? Consumers need better products and services. They want comfort and convenience. They want newer products, innovative solutions, and so on. They want some level of personal safety. They want to ensure that their property is protected, their rights are all protected, and consumers pay for their products, and what they expect is that they get value for the price they pay. They want it to be reasonably priced. I think it's incorrect to assume that consumers want the cheapest. Actually, they want the best from what they could afford, or they want reasonably priced goods and services. They want some of their social needs to be fulfilled, the newest thing is that consumers also want to be associated with brands and leaders that have certain values and principles. In between all of this, what are the governments and regulators trying to do? What are their priorities? Right? They are trying to balance what businesses need, what consumers need, what's right for the society and the nation, and so on. They are trying to localize the industries where they believe there needs to be some level of self-reliance and sustainability. They are trying to bring in things like facility localization, manufacturing localization, data localization, and such. They want the market to be competitive. They want a level playing field for established players, new players, global players, local players. They want it to be multiplayer. They believe that is what delivers the best and ultimate value to consumers. They want businesses to be able to operate in an ecosystem. They need interoperability. They want consumers to have a choice to port from one to another. We'll emphasize a little more on this later. They want to also ensure that the social impact, such as impact on environment, culture, inclusion, legalities, etc., are managed. Consent architecture is an important aspect. Again, we'll touch upon it later. They are concerned about national security, protecting critical resources, protection of national IP, and so on. And they want to ensure a fair level of taxation. Right? These are all kind of broad priorities for digital regulators. And just to kind of talk through some examples of how governments have been acting, and particularly how Indian government has acted based on these kind of priorities. We've seen government is extremely active in promoting startups, encouraging new players, kind of innovation to come into the ecosystem. and trying to create a level playing field for everyone. We are seeing that they are trying to ban apps and companies which are either operating illegally or in gray areas, or abusing the market or trying to dump things into the market. They are creating restrictions, and we saw that when a bunch of Chinese apps were banned in India. Data localization has become a reality. There's a clear-cut guideline expectation on the needs for data localization, particularly in financial technology, but that also is spreading across multiple different businesses, including social media. Will have some impact in the future. And within a given industry or segment, government is also trying to make sure that, and regulators are making sure that there are multiple players. They don't want one super dominating player and for the rest of them to perish. So if a good example is NPCI came up with a cap on the number of UPI transactions that any single player can have, which is now at 30%. And interoperability that I mentioned, Ocean, which is Open Credit and Enablement Network, is a fantastic initiative that helps more sachetize the financial products and deliver it to the most remotest and underserviced sectors and segments in the society. It also allows for a lot of innovation and startups to come in and have a play there. A similar initiative on e-commerce is the ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce, where any platform could connect to any consumer app, and buyers and sellers could get interconnected. And this is at a conceptual stage right now, but we can see where we are headed. Very recently, G20 countries reached a global tax deal where they all agreed that the tech giants have not paid fair taxes, or whether they've paid or not, at least we need to make sure that we put in frameworks to ensure they continue to pay fair taxes in every jurisdiction. And data protection, lastly, which is going to be a subject of deeper dive for us, is that everybody is calling for stronger data protection, consumer data protection, personal data protection. And it started with GDPR in the EU, and pretty much every large country has some of the other guidelines or laws around these. We'll examine those in a little more detail. While governments are kind of working on digital regulations, keeping in mind their interests and balancing the interests of businesses and consumers and national interest, consumers are also increasingly becoming aware of privacy. Right? And this is a survey result, from datareportal.com, which is Digital 2020 India report. Important numbers for us to see here. 1 in 3 people have concerns about how their personal data is used in India right now, and 1 in 2 actually do something about it, right? Which is that they are either blocking ads, they are deleting or not accepting cookies, clearing browser history, not revealing IP addresses, something or the other. They're acting to kind of protect their personal information, and that is because there is an increasing distrust on how their data is used or exploited by some of the technology players. And what is the biggest element of distrust that consumers have? I want to extract it from this survey. The biggest one is how they feel their personal data could be misused by these digital businesses. Which is a significant portion of the people that participate in this survey, which had 40,000 people across 20 plus countries, including in India. So while I say that consumers have concerns, I think their expectations are varied, and their tolerance levels are also varied, for which I'll kind of use this a summary from the survey that we conducted amongst 500 odd students from IITs and IIMs. This was, created a series of scenarios to say, if you experienced so-and-so in an imaginary kirana shop in your neighborhood, how do you feel? And the questions ranged from, personalization and recommendations, tracking of activity, to understanding personal behavior, personal choices beyond the kirana shop, and then trying to collaborate with other businesses to kind of bundle or package products, to some competitiveness related questions, and moving to anti-competition type of questions, and ultimately misuse or abuse of data in those businesses. And we saw that the range of the tolerance was kind of different within the groups. If you see in the middle, there were a bulk of the people had certain expectations, and that pattern I'll be better able to establish using this. So the first initial level of personalization was kind of appreciated. Then it led to somewhere in the middle, it led to concerns around privacy, and on competitiveness. I think it led to anti-competition related concerns, and lastly, I think a bulk of the folks were kind of clear to say these are illegal, unlawful type of activities, and they were able to flag those off. So where does the constitution or law stand on privacy? In India, through a Supreme Court ruling in 2017, it was established that privacy is a fundamental right. Likewise, in the US, a series of Supreme Court judgments have ruled that privacy is a fundamental right. The EU Charter of Fundamental Rights has its specific chapter where they talk about liberty, privacy, protection of personal data, and so on as a fundamental right. So I think globally it is now established, accepted that privacy is a fundamental right that needs to get protected. And what are the regulations around privacy? If you look at this list, there are what 15 or 16 countries that have listed. All of them have data protection or consumer data protection, data privacy type of laws, including in India, where it is yet to become a law. It is in a bill state. But what are the general principles, right? While each country's law may have certain variations, certain differences, I think by and large, broadly, they all have the same principles, which is that the data subjects or data principals are the owners, rightful owners of the data. So if it is data about you, you are the rightful owner of the data, irrespective of who's the custodian, who's the fiduciary, where the data is hosted or held, by who, for what purpose. The next important principle is around the rights, the ownership rights, right? So if you are the owner, then you as the data owner has the right, and I'm talking to you as a consumer, you as the consumer, you have the right to know what data I as a business have, to ask for full disclosure of all the data that I have about you, and to ask me what is the purpose of using having your data, what will I use it for, will I share it with others, and so on. At the same time, you also have the right to ask for data if you believe is incorrect with me to be corrected. If you want your data to be deleted or erased, you can ask for that as well. So these are kind of rights that that the consumers are being given. And technology and processes. This will again we'll talk about the opportunities that it creates. There is also a big emphasis on enterprises or businesses implementing technology and processes to ensure that they meet all the obligations of data protection laws by implementing such technologies and processes. And also to, for the data to be used only for lawful purposes, right, for which it was collected and disclosed and declared. So these are the general principles. I want to use a good example from the Indian ecosystem on how some of these data rights are being passed on to the consumers. while the objective of DEPA, may have been multifold, right? It was also to expand financial inclusion, expand the reach of the financial service industry. But this consent architecture that was created as part of DEPA, I think brings out the aspect of consent management, where the right for the data is kind of given to the consumer. So this DEPA is essentially a framework to accelerate financial inclusion, like I said. But using this framework, the end consumer who may have multiple financial relationships with financial institutions, he has the ability to aggregate all of that information with the third party if he chooses to, or ask for that information to be shared between one another. And all of this is enabled by a third party consent manager, an independent regulatory approved consent manager known as account aggregators, who act as the custodians of these consent, who don't hold the data, who are only intermediaries for transporting data between these enterprises, but they essentially ensure that customers' mandate is kept and managed and fulfilled on customers' behalf. And this could very well extend this kind of framework, or similar frameworks could apply to any other industry where consumer data is very widely used. So finally moving to opportunities in privacy tech. Let's start by talking about what is privacy tech. So privacy tech is it's a broad term used to describe technology solutions that solve privacy problems, and privacy problems could be those of enterprises or consumers. Right? And is it any different from information security, cyber security? We keep talking about these, and many a times we use them interchangeably. So cyber security means protecting against attacks in the cyberspace, right? Protecting your data centers, your devices, your networks from attacks in the cyber world. Information security, on the other hand, is not only protecting information from cyber attacks, but it is also protecting it from any sort of threat, internal or external, and whether it is in the digital space or in the analog space, right, or in the physical space. So it is a little broader that way. Personal data protection is actually much broader than these two, but more narrowly focused on consumer data. It means all the obligations and the technology, processes, etc. that are needed to ensure that the rights of personal data, as we saw earlier in the previous slide about consumer rights or personal data protection obligations, all of those are fulfilled by an enterprise. And if you ask me who needs privacy tech, every enterprise, right? Whether they are in the physical space, digital, they are phygital in their business model. In pretty much every industry will need privacy technology, and every consumer will need privacy technology, right? Consumers have an option whether they they want to super obsess about privacy and have a lot of technology, or they want to go light. But enterprises do not even have that choice. Everybody needs to have privacy technology to ensure that they meet the compliance requirements. That brings me to the question, will enterprises really spend on privacy technology? Sorry, before I move to this, I just wanted to pause and see if there are questions. I see a couple of them coming.
Yeah, Shailendra, should I ask you? There are a couple of questions. Do you want to answer them right now?
Yeah, I can take them right now. Yes.
Sure.
Let's go.
So the first question has come. How would a consumer know that their data is out in public? Only after that they can decide to take action on correction or blocking.
Brilliant question. So I'll touch upon that in the very next slide, or I think 2 slides from now. So I'll park it aside.
Sure. Then there's another one. This is specifically on a company from the company's founder, Sagar from 13tabs.com. So the question is, recently the parliamentary committee has recommended to ban VPN services in India. If government accepts the recommendation, I would like to know your views on its impact in the market and any business opportunity that it could create or disrupt.
Yeah. Okay, I'll again pick this up when we talk about enterprise technologies. Done. Thanks, Shivam. So yeah, I was talking about privacy technology, and will enterprises really spend on privacy technology, right? So I think the emphasis and the focus right now of governments and regulators is on big tech, right? Because that is where they believe that they've reached a level of market domination and in a competitive advantage that some level of regulation is essential. But I think every business will eventually need tools for consumer data protection and to meet all the regulatory requirements, because these guidelines are not limited to only big tech, right? They're applicable to pretty much every enterprise, every business. So if you look at GDPR, GDPR has defined a 20 million euro penalty, up to $20 million, 20 million euros for any major breach of data protection obligations, consumer data protection obligations, right? Or it is 4%, whichever is higher. So, and this 4% is of worldwide revenue, worldwide turnover of the digital enterprise. This is just not a deterrent of sorts. It is also being acted upon. There are several cases of GDPR penalties being issued to big, medium, and small businesses, many of these that you see on the Europe map are major fines that have been imposed, which runs in excess of €1 billion. But also to note is that the small fines, right? A good example is a police officer in one of the EU countries checked up on the records of his fiancée, and he was penalized because he had no consent to look at that information or no legal basis as part of an investigation for him to pull up the records and look at it. So big or small, nobody is spared in terms of enforcing these the obligations of consumer data protection. In India, the PDP bill also has very much similar to GDPR, but I should say that it's more stringent and is a little more wider in its application. The proposed penalties as per PDP is similar to what's in GDPR. It's $2 million or up to 4% of global turnover. Now imagine the impact of something like this on, I give you an example of what's the global turnover of a large social media company. What's the revenue at risk? What's the dollar value at risk? It's a massive sum. And together with potential imprisonment, which is also proposed as part of PDP for severe extreme breaches. Right? So the cost of non-compliance is extremely high, and it is not limited to penalties or fines. Right? It's not only monetary. It could also come with regulatory restrictions, business restrictions. It could come with costs around settlement. It most definitely will have a reputational impact, and productivity will be lost. People will spend enormous amounts of bandwidth and management time running around and chasing and rectifying these mistakes. So the cost of non-compliance is extremely high. So I don't think non-compliance is even an option for enterprises. So now let's talk about enterprise privacy tech. Right? What do we mean by privacy tech? It's a pretty vast area. Like I said, it covers aspects of cyber security, information security, but there's also a lot more that is needed to be done to be fully compliant to the global regulations on data protection, and also to be able to create a framework and a foundation which gives enterprises the ability to adopt to changing regulatory requirements faster. Right? So privacy technology will kind of range from data policy management to personal data and document storage, to consumer interactions, customer workflows, data collection, all those channels and interfaces with customers. It entails information security. It entails management of customer requests and communicating with customers. And it also covers integration with third parties and the processes that are required around that. Right? If you kind of dive a little deeper and look at these things, what specifically do we have? In terms of personal data management, discovery of data that is in an enterprise, identifying all the places and silos and systems and storages where consumer data is hosted or stored within an enterprise, being able to catalog all of those, having a clearer view of what data is where, being able to kind of encrypt it, mask it, geofence it, or localize it as the regulations require. Each of these aspects require tools and solutions, right? Ability to manage this data, set up automatic, purging / archival, deletion type of rules, and being able to monitor all of that. There are tools and technologies that enterprises need for that. On the customer workflows, at every point of interaction, disclosures on terms of use and data policy and usage, etc. Ability to collect customer consent or opt-ins wherever that's required, and putting security and controls at every point of customer workflow. Right? Again, there are tools and technologies that enterprises need, and each of this could be a very specialized offering, and many of these already are offerings in the market. Right? On the information security front, cyber security and kind of managing external threats, there are tools and technology for that, but I believe the world needs more of those. Managing internal frauds and detection of misuse, etc., is another area, and ensuring high availability, ensuring that the infrastructure where all of the customer data is hosted is is available, as well as the integrity of the systems are managed. On the customer request and communication process, ability for enterprises to communicate with consumers on any breach or policy changes, how their data is used or how it will be used in the future. That's another mandate which requires, again, some level of tooling or automation. Ability to manage the customer requests when it comes to requests on retrieval of data, rectification of data, withdrawal of consent for usage of data or processing of data. All of that in itself is a calls for a solution or an application that enterprises will need. And at some point in time, portability will come in, where in certain industries, in certain segments, where enterprises will need to be able to kind of manage portability with all the data that they have about consumers, which consumers own. They need to be able to hand it off. So management of that will again require some kind of technology. Third-party integration, it could be around KYC, identity verification, and this is pretty prevalent. If you see, pretty much everybody is doing this, but enhancements and newer technology on this front is also required as we look at how data privacy will impact this area. There could be third-party consent managers, like I mentioned in financial services, there being a third-party consent manager, like an account aggregator. In some industries, there could be third-party consent managers, and integration with those will also become important. As simple a requirement as data anonymization or redaction could also be a tool or a solution, because information will need to be disclosed by enterprises as part of RTI Act or part of some legal process, but they will continue to have the responsibility or obligation to ensure customer data is protected, and all their compliances are met. And coming to the most difficult or challenging, which is all encompassing, is tracking the regulatory changes, because as of today, data protection laws globally are at a very nascent stage. We will expect that there will be revisions and enhancements to those laws, and being able to track all of those and being able to meet the changing regulatory guidelines is going to be an onerous task on enterprises, and they will need some kind of tools and frameworks to be able to manage with that. And bringing in a whole new dimension to this problem for the enterprises is managing global compliances on data protection, because the more digital a business or more global a business, they are kind of juggling between multiple jurisdictions and multiple overlapping sort of compliance requirements. So they need to make sure that data subjects in their respective jurisdictions get the right protection that they are entitled to as per the local laws, which brings in a whole new level of complexity to enterprises. Right. Before I move on to the consumer side, maybe I'll quickly pause and see if there are any other questions. Shivam,
yes, we have a question, and also just a time check for you. We have 10 more minutes. So one question that has come from Pathikrit, it's what it says is, going forward, we are going to see the emergence of several health and lifestyle focused startups because of the pandemic. So how should these startups bridge the trust deficit with consumers when it comes to accessing that data? And they're asking from the perspective of personal health. So for example, a lot of data is being collected through these devices or apps, right? So how can these startups or companies make sure that they are able to earn the trust for customers?
Yeah, I'll come to that in the next section, Shivam, where I'll talk about consumer side of data protection. Sure. But I also see another question.
Yeah. So the question is, are there tools which address all of these issues as of now, as of today?
Yeah, that's a more pertinent question when it comes to enterprise tools. There are, my own last count, there are 300 odd companies which claim to have privacy tech for enterprises. Now, privacy tech need not necessarily be specialized, tools or products to help solve, privacy related problems. Many companies are calling their tools as privacy tech, just because they are in their own area of specialization. They are making their tools, privacy laws or privacy guidelines compliant. But are there specialized tools for all of these requirements? There are quite well-established ones. There are a few Indian companies as well. For example, if you look at the area of personal data and document management, you can expect that a lot of the data platforms, hosted data platforms, or your technologies such as cloud-based data lake platforms, platforms that help with creating enterprise data repositories, ETL type of technologies. All of them will try to move into this area. They've already started moving into this area because this is more adjacent to them, and it kind of builds on top of a core technology that they've already built. So you will find many players that are kind of already actively in that space.
Right.
Customer workflow and data collection area. You will see that there are players that are offering consent management tools already, and this is becoming essential.
Right.
So that's another area where there is play. Cybersecurity and fraud management has been a focus area for the last 10-20 years. So there's been a lot of investment there and a lot of players in that space. Customer request and communication. We have seen a few companies that have come up with specialized products that help companies manage these requests from customers around retrieval of data, around rectification and consent withdrawal and things like that.
Right.
But I believe the space is still much more broader, and a lot more players can play in that area.
Sure. So Shailendra, you have actually 5 to 6 minutes to cover a lot of things. So I'll let you go on with that now.
Okay, done. Let me quickly go to the consumer side. Now, coming to the consumer part of it, right? Will consumers spend on privacy technology? Right? Will you and me as individuals, are we worried enough that privacy is a problem and I want to buy certain tools and protect my own data? If you see now, privacy is a price that we are all paying for what we perceive as free services. Right? We are submitting our data to the various digital platforms, and we are happy for them to use that data as long as we are kind of benefiting from that. We want value out of what data we are submitting. But as more and more consumers will become aware of how their data is being used, how much value is being extracted by the enterprises, and their own intrusion of their own privacy and so on, I think consumers will eventually come to a point where they're going to be willing to pay for privacy technology. To articulate this point, I pulled out a report. I couldn't find anything which was more recent, but this is a report from 2014, where consumers from US, China, India, UK, and Germany were asked a question on how much money will you be willing to spend to protect various kinds of personal data. Right? They kind of bucketed them into various categories, surprisingly, in 2014 there were already a good number of people that were willing to spend money and pay from their pockets to ensure that the data is protected. And the pattern varied from country to country. I think this was also broadly based on the level of digital adoption and the level of awareness of consumers on how their data is used. But this, I'm sure, would have kind of significantly increased by now, the number of people that will be willing to pay to protect their data. Now, what are those areas where consumer privacy technology can be introduced? Right? You can think of this as multifold. Right? One is technology on devices, right? Whether it is mobile or laptop or things like that consumers use to access these digital services or products. Then you have your the interfaces, the browser that you typically use to engage with, or the consumer apps that you use to engage with the digital businesses. I think that that is again something very prevalent, and there are privacy tools on that front. But I think there is room for much more. Right? As consumers become more aware, they want technology of their choice, of their liking. I think this will open up a lot more opportunities. There is requirement for IP masking and VPN tools, and there was a previous question on what happens to this if there's a ban on using VPN, for example, or a ban on IP masking, for example. but this is it's I don't think it's a one-way street, right? It has two sides to it. There is a genuine need for consumers to protect their IP, and it could also be a need for for malintent. But let's set that aside. But when as this regulations will take shape, I believe that there will be a balance that will be found between the two. But that opens up another area for innovation, right? Which is how can we ensure that identity of devices, individuals, and location is masked from some of these services if the consumer so chooses to, right? That's an area. Then you have your email servers and hosted whatever cloud hosting servers for storing messages or documents that we all so much use. There could be private ones, there could be more secure ones, there could be ones that are not shared with any other service which could be mining data or information from the data that you're saving, and kind of keeping them siloed or independent of each other so that nobody's profiling you or identifying your patterns and kind of bringing all the pieces together. I think there will be consumers who will want that and will be willing to pay for that. I think there is also good buzz about potentially having decentralized networks for various things, including finance, but also an important aspect is decentralized social networking potentially, so that no one entity has a complete view about individuals or communities, and are able to unfairly use that data. And lastly, personal data discovery. Again, I'm relating it back to a question that I had. Jay said I'll answer later. I think there is also a need for tools that will enable consumers to discover all their data that is in the internet, right? And I've come across at least one very interesting company that is trying to do something like this. It is not fully comprehensive. They look at patterns of emails and ads that you are getting on your computer and trying to map who are those people that are using these kind of techniques in the back end, and try to detect potentially where your data is. But there could be better techniques and technologies for us to identify all the places where personal data is stored and what that means. So Shivam just indicated that I am up for time. I wanted to save in the last 5 or 10 minutes for Q&A, but I think we took up most of the questions through the session. Yeah. I'll leave you with this thought, right? India Inc. and the enterprise world need solutions in privacy technology. Consumers globally need solutions on privacy technology, and it's up to us. Let's all go out there and solve for them. There are enormous business opportunities here. With that, I'd like to say thank you, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and happy to exchange notes and thoughts. Thanks everyone, and Shivam, back to you.
Thanks, Shailendra. I think this was a brilliant session. We've got a couple of comments on the points that you've shared as well. We have Ashwini, who had mentioned that this is very informative, and deep dive into privacy tech is super useful, especially as they are security entrepreneurs. So it helps them in understanding what are the business opportunities. There's one question, but I think I'll answer that. It's pretty simple. How individual privacy can be secured from government agencies spying on you? I would suggest, see, as citizens, we just need to ensure that our representatives understand what we are expecting. So, all these things are more related from the citizenry point of view rather than enterprise. So I'll spare Shailendra to answer that. Shailendra, thank you so much for joining in. I think this was really useful. We'll definitely plan more sessions on this area. I think especially from the point of view of consumer privacy and then enterprise privacy, I think we need more time to address both of these segments separately as well. But great to learn so many insights regarding these topics. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. I think I'm sure you would have found this relevant as well, and we'll plan more sessions for you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Shailendra. Thanks for joining in. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.